Today, let's talk about the dangers of phishing emails. We've all received them, be it from a fake online store or a random website, and so have our parents. These types of emails are designed to trick you into giving away sensitive information such as login credentials or credit card numbers. It's easy to fall victim to these attacks, especially if you're not tech savvy. That's where the sponsor for today's video, NordVPN, comes in. With its threat protection feature, NordVPN helps keep you and your family safe from phishing attacks and other cyber threats. It's more than just a VPN. It protects you from ads, web trackers, and malware, and can be used on up to 6 devices on all major platforms, including Windows, Mac, Linux, Android, and iOS. Plus, it allows you to bypass geo restrictions and unlock more content online. And with 5,400 servers in 60 countries, you can find a server that's close to you for better speed, or one that's further away to get access to more content. This can be especially useful for online shopping, as you can buy products not available in your country or take advantage of lower prices in other countries. NordVPN is also confirmed to be the fastest VPN on the market, as demonstrated by speed tests. With NordVPN, you can feel secure and protected while browsing the web, and with a risk-free 30-day money-back guarantee, there's no reason not to give it a try. But don't wait. For a limited time, NordVPN is offering an exclusive deal. Get a 2-year plan with a huge discount and 1 month for free when you visit nordvpn.com/TIFO. Protect yourself and your loved ones with NordVPN. And now today's video. Hollywood is full of young, beautiful people with perfect teeth, washboard abs, and fully functioning limbs. But not all roles fit that look. So what do directors do when they want to cast someone for a role who perhaps falls outside of the hyper-idealized version of attractiveness handed down by Hollywood? As it turns out, they're usually exactly as cold and brutally honest as they are with every aspiring, beautiful actor who walks through their doors. To wit, while of course different casting directors have different ways of working and all of that, in the general case, if a casting director wants to hire someone with an atypical body type, a physical deformity, or other unusual feature, they'll come right out and say it in the casting call. For example, a casting call put out in 2015 for the then unnamed major new feature film being filmed around London that refused to reveal what it was, even though the only big movie being filmed in the area at the time was Star Wars Episode 7, made it known that the director was looking for the following kinds of people to fill out the background of a scene. To quote, interesting looks, character faces, memorable, eye-catching looks, unusual type looks. This could be people with strong physical features, facial scars, big beards, long hair, bad teeth, large facial features, dreadlocks, or interesting ethnic appearances such as darker skin or light eyes. This was amongst the most tactful casting calls we found, as it never actually goes so far as to say the director wanted to cast unattractive people per se, just that they wanted them to have an interesting look. Other casting calls we found were, shall we say, more direct. For example, Kim Maguire was famously cast for the role of Hatchet Face in the film Crybaby starring Johnny Depp, thanks to an advert stating, "Wanted, girl with a good body and an alarming face who is proud of it." She rather fit the bill, though she does point out that they further exaggerated her features with makeup. She states, "When people see me after seeing that, they think I look really good." And it is here that we should point out the elephant in the room, that yes, this all generally applies even with child actors, and when a film or show calls, for example, a hideously ugly or obese child, they're usually going to make it clear what they want, and sometimes, obviously, it even gets pointed out in the script itself. That said, some directors are more sensitive than others, with perhaps the most famous example we could find of this sort of thing being in the holiday classic Home Alone. In it, the picture of Buzz's girlfriend that Kevin finds is supposed to be depicted as extremely unattractive. However, director Chris Columbus thought it would be too cruel to cast a young girl for such a photo. Thus, to get around the issue, they simply used a boy made to look like a girl. In another example we found in the HBO show The Deuce starring James Franco, they asked for unattractive males to apply for a scene set in a 1970s gay bar. As the casting call noted, men of all shapes and sizes were welcome to apply, as long as they had a period-accurate haircut. Similarly, a casting call for an unnamed NBC pilot from 2016 was sent out asking for overweight men and women that weigh 250 pounds plus. They were to be background actors in a scene set in a Weight Watchers type environment. And yes, just like we showed on screen, that was in all caps. Casting calls asking for people of a specific race or gender with a particular look can be similarly blunt and at times hilariously tactless. For example, numerous aspiring Middle Eastern actors have noted that they've received casting calls for roles simply described as terrorist. Further, holy shit. Further, in our research, women with a dress size over 6 can generally find themselves auditioning for roles where the character is described as everything from chubby to, and we're not making this up, not aspirational looking. Women especially have to put up with some ridiculous casting notes, with one female actor we found noting that she auditioned for a role where the character is described thusly: her cleavage is her best feature. While some of these look pretty thoughtless to an outsider, for many actors it's part of their day-to-day life, and they take it all on the chin. In the end, for many such individuals, they just want to be able to pay their bills and or get their faces in a movie at the same time. For actors, how they look is just as important a factor as the kind of accents they could do or whether they have experience in martial arts or the like. It's why actors take headshots. Speaking of which, to quote an anonymous bigwig casting director from an Entertainment Weekly profile, yes, headshots have to be retouched, but there's nothing worse than calling the person in and they don't look anything like the photo. If you're an ugly actress or you're fat, that's how you're going to get hired. In other words, actors, or at least successful ones, play the hands they're dealt. An extreme example is actor Javier Botet. Born with Marfan syndrome, which gives him an exceptionally lean build with long limbs and fingers and an almost unnatural degree of flexibility in his joints, Botet has parlayed his appearance into a lucrative film career playing various monsters, such as the Crooked Man from The Conjuring 2. Botet may never play a leading man in a romantic comedy, but his unique physique means that he is one of the few individuals able to convincingly play these characters without CGI. Another actor who seems content with the niche they've carved for themselves is Danny Trejo. In interviews, Trejo has explained that for much of his early career, directors would simply tell his agent to get them that Mexican guy with the big tattoo, and that the only thing he'd be asked to do was stand on screen and look menacing before being shot or something, which he found amusing. As he said, "I remember the first time anyone interviewed me. It was this young Chicana out of college, real into La Raza. Danny, don't you feel you're being stereotyped? You're always playing the mean Chicano dude with tattoos." So I lifted up my shirt and said, "What are you talking about? I am the mean Chicano dude with tattoos." As a side note, Trejo spent many years in prison before becoming an actor, and once recalled that in one of his first acting roles, the director asked him without any hint of irony, "Can you act like a convict?" To which he wryly quipped, "I'll give it a shot." And as for his so-called acting training, he states, "When you're in a prison yard and something is going to come down, you really want to be locked up in your cell, but instead you have to stand and pretend you're not afraid. That's acting." For a more direct example, early in his career, he was filming a scene in which he had to rob a store and managed to nail it on the first take. To quote, "The director asked me to kick down a door holding a sawn-off shotgun and hold up 15 people. After the scene, people clapped and said, 'My God, where did you study?' I said, 'Supermarkets and Bank of America.'" This wasn't hyperbole. Among the many crimes he committed in his youth was robbing several stores and banks. His general modus operandi in the latter case was to intentionally cause the bank alarm to be tripped and then observe how long it took the police to respond. He stated back then that it was usually around 4 minutes. He and his cohorts would later steal a car, go in and rob the bank for real, usually trying to keep everyone as calm as possible to expedite the robbery and avoid getting trigger happy. This worked. Despite committing armed robbery on numerous occasions, he states, "I never got arrested for armed robbery. Mine was all drugs." On the complete opposite side of the typecasting pond is Jesse Hyman, a character actor and prolific extra who, despite being 44 years old these days, has been playing teenagers and young adults his entire career, often appearing in the background of movies whenever they need a typical nerdy-looking character. Despite his low-profile nature, director Michael Bay is said to have requested Hyman personally for a scene in one of the Transformers movies because of his ability to portray a portly, bookish character. In what was apparently the first interview he ever gave at 32 years old, after appearing in some 56 movies, Hyman noted of his appearance, "I think I could become one of the great character actors like Jonah Hill," an actor with whom he shares a fairly strong physical resemblance. Moving on from there, when a role calls for a person with a specific disability, usually an amputee, a casting call will be as direct and blunt as many of the others noted here. The show The Walking Dead, for example, frequently makes use of amputee actors to portray zombies in various states of decomposition. In yet another blunt casting practice, little person comedian Brad Williams noted that in one gig he got, the producers required they come dressed in their elf costume, assuming that any of the little people hired would already own one, which, to be fair, he humorously states that he did. The whole process is so normalized that there are even companies that specifically exist to connect amputee stunt actors with Hollywood films looking to cast people missing specific limbs. For these actors, they can even make extra money taking part in role-playing exercises where they play people who've been horrifically hurt in various accidents to help train paramedics. For some reason, this usually doesn't extend to people in wheelchairs. As we've noted before in our video, The Silver Lining to the Worst Movie Ever Made, Hollywood often refrains from hiring actors in wheelchairs, generally giving the role to an able-bodied person unless the role is specifically written disabled. This is a persistent problem in the world of acting that is slowly being addressed. As for this so-called worst movie, it's a shameless rip-off of E.T. called Mac and Me, and by the way, this movie was the first one Jennifer Aniston was ever in. The main boy in the movie is in a wheelchair, and he's played by a child who really is disabled in this way. Just as interesting about this choice is that the film never makes a big deal about the character's handicap. It isn't an integral part of his character or the plot, and it isn't played for laughs or for sympathy. He's refreshingly and very purposefully portrayed as just a normal kid doing otherwise normal things until he encounters his little alien friends. The fact that he's in a wheelchair isn't even commented on by any character in the movie. Moreover, the fact that the kid was in a wheelchair both in the film and in real life wasn't overtly mentioned in the marketing campaigns either. While in a perfect world, this shouldn't be notable in any way. As noted in an LA Times article from the time of the film's release, this was and still is a huge deal because it marked one of the exceptionally few times in film history where a disabled actor had secured a role for a character that wasn't written disabled and didn't have the disability made into a defining character trait or plot element. In stark contrast to this, the then child actor in question, Jade Caligari, later noted when he showed up for other auditions to play various disabled characters, not only were the characters always written disabled, but it was generally very obvious that the casting directors had no interest in hiring an actual disabled person. To quote him, they were just kind of bringing disabled people in just to say they did. You know what I mean? All this said, when it comes to established actors, sometimes the production crew will, of course, care less about what they look like and more about their name and if they can make them look like they need. This is most common when it comes to the use of fat suits. Although notable here when using a male established actor, sometimes they simply ask the actor to gain or lose a certain number of pounds to get in the ballpark of what they require. But notably for actresses, this is rarely done outside of exceptions like Renee Zellweger in Bridget Jones's Diary. But in the end, when casting directors want a person to have a specific look, you can pretty much guarantee they're going to be fairly straightforward about the kind of person they're looking for, even with children. With the notable exception of certain disabilities, such as being in a wheelchair, which for whatever reason casting directors tend to prefer to cast people without that disability in most cases. No matter what, however, with any of this, if you work in the industry, one thing is clear. You better have pretty thick skin, metaphorically speaking, or possibly literally if the role requires it. And incidentally, if you're wondering about where all these general casting calls show up, particularly for things like extras or with open casting calls, as alluded to, usually some sort of ad is posted announcing the need. Depending on the scope of the project and the kind of extras needed, this ad could appear anywhere from a dedicated website to Craigslist. We even found examples of casting directors using Facebook and Twitter to round up extras quickly in a pinch. For the professional extra, and yes, there is such a thing, or of course a more accomplished actor, they may even have an agent who helps them book gigs. On the extra front, many of these barely make more than minimum wage. However, if the individual is a career extra, then they tend to be members of SAG-AFTRA and earn a much more respectable amount of money in the order of around $200 per workday, plus more if a given shoot lasts more than 8 hours, which isn't uncommon.